Good morning, good afternoon, and good day wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of Sales TV Live. Today, we're transitioning from founder-led sales to scalable sales teams. I'm joined by Elizabeth Andrew. Elizabeth is a 5-time sales leader and fractional CRO. She's guided multiple companies through this pivotal transition, scaling organizations from zero to over $100 million in annual recurring revenue. Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you, Rob. It's great to be here. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. I'm so looking forward to
Excellent.
this conversation.
Likewise.
Elizabeth, let's start by having you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what led you to where you are today.
Sure. I actually have a very unusual background for tech, to be honest. I started out, and for sales, I started out in the investment industry. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I was in the mutual fund business at Franklin Funds, and then helped Wells Fargo Asset Management build their very first investment mutual fund company. It was the Overland Express Funds. And I was on a founding team of about 4 people, and we took it from zero to over $1 billion in assets for Wells Fargo. And the last region we went into as an investment company was the Northeast. And so they asked me to go open up that region since that's the investment capital of the world, similar to the way the Bay Area is in tech, or has been prior, at least prior to the pandemic. So I moved out there sight unseen to Boston in January. And this was decades ago, calling on stockbrokers, working out of my house and my car back when carrying a bag was carrying a bag. And I took that region from zero to 70 million in assets. And, it was a really tremendous experience. I was trained by probably the #2 investment wholesaler in the world at the time out of New York. And so I really found the foundation for sales at that point. When I moved east, my family said to me, go for 2 years, have a great time, don't fall in love. And I ended up getting married and spent 20 years out on the East Coast in the New York area, 17 as a stay-at-home mom. And so I raised my kids out there, and then in 2011 moved back to the Bay Area and felt like my kids were getting a little older and it's time to get back to work, and wanted to relaunch a career. And as you can imagine, Rob, I was totally unemployable. After 17 years as a stay-at-home mom, nobody would even talk to me. And, my previous experience didn't really matter to anybody at that juncture. And so I found myself in a job search, and I got my first job working for the West Region Director of Sales at Putnam Investments, but I found the job through Craigslist, of all things. And I did that for about a year and just felt like there's no fun to be had in financial services. So much has changed. And so as long as I was in San Francisco with all the energy, why not try tech? And I've had a really good run over the last 13 years in technology.
Fantastic. So I've been looking forward to this conversation because of some conversations I had earlier this week. I am
Okay.
a mentor with Techstars, and I had the
Okay.
opportunity to meet with about a dozen different startup founders.
Okay.
And all of them, knowing my background is in sales and tech, had questions regarding founder-led sales. And I said to them, hold that thought. I've got somebody that you're really going to want to hear from. So I'm looking forward to the questions and answers we have today. Let's jump right into it.
Sure.
What are the signs that a business needs to transition away from founder-led sales?
Sure. Well, what I think the biggest mistake that founders make, right, is that initial sales hires. That's probably the most costly and expensive mistake. And, I've been a 3-time VP of sales, a 5-time sales leader. I've also been CEO of an early stage startup where I was doing founder-led sales. And, and now I'm doing consulting really I work with founders to make that transition from founder-led sales to building a scalable sales team. And first of all, I won't work with any founders that haven't at least sold 5 or 10 deals on their own. And I think what happens with a lot of founders is that they build their product, they're passionate about it. Many of them come from the technical or product side, and then they want to hire a salesperson before they've even gotten any traction. So, I think the first part of that answer is that the founder nobody's going to be as passionate, even if they don't come from a sales background, as the founder about their product. So they're not ready until they've actually gone out and sold the product themselves successfully. And, I would say a minimum of 5 to 10 deals, before it even makes sense to talk to anybody. But once they've got that and they've gotten some success in the market, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but, gotten some paid customers, the next step is really to take their pitch, take what's working and make that repeatable. So that's really what I do before, sometimes that initial sales, there's no really rhyme or reason. Every founder has a different strategy. When I was doing it as a CEO, I was doing founder-led sales. I wanted to bootstrap. So I didn't want to hire any salespeople. And I actually used affiliate programs. I used partnership programs and a lot of other means to build sales traction other than actually building a scalable sales team. And that's primarily because of the way the markets have gone recently, right? But the single most important thing to transition is to get that story down and make sure that you've got a pitch, a presentation, your elevator pitch, your story, understand what your target market is, and get all of those pieces together down in some form of a playbook. And it's going to be iterated on a lot over the course of building and scaling, right? But get some sort of playbook together before you try to jump in and build a sales team.
So I think you've already started to answer the next question I have, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How can founders hand over sales responsibilities without losing the company's vision?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do, because those early salespeople, especially if you have a founder who doesn't come from the sales side or the business side of the company, right? The initial salespeople are not going to be able to have the same pitch, right? So you've got to really define what that is. So when I go in and I work with a founder, the first thing I do is I take the first month to 3 months, depending on kind of the nature of the business, and I do an audit. Not only do I get all of the information down from the founder in terms of what their pitch is, who they're talking to, what they see as the target market, I also talk to customers. I talk to other people in the organization, even if there isn't any salespeople yet. I talk to the product people, I talk to the engineers, and so that I'm really doing a full audit of kind of what the vision of the company is, and then getting that down into some sort of process. And one of the biggest dangers I think that founders can do too is to over process that, right? You just need a basics. You don't need it to be, you don't have to build out when you're very early. You don't have to build out all of the tools that you're going to have in your sales enablement bucket, but you need to know kind of what are the fundamental things and what is the plan for the next 12 to 18 months to get to where you need to be.
What are some of the key challenges businesses face when transitioning from founder-led sales to a professional sales team?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges that a lot of founders have is they think that they're going to get their sales team they think they can hire a sales team to get product market fit. And that's not the role of the sales team, is to find product market fit, right? So I think that's where, and I've been a VP of sales where I've been the third or fourth sales leader that hasn't worked, right? Because I think, I've worked with a lot of genius CEOs, and I say this a lot. I've been in the Silicon Valley. I've been the only person on my leadership team that wasn't first generation Indian. I've been the only person on my leadership team that wasn't first generation Russian. So many of my CEOs that I've worked for come from the product or engineering side. They're coming out of MIT and Harvard and Stanford and really great schools and very, very smart. There's a common thread that I've seen with a lot of them is that they all love their product and they all think it's going to sell itself, and it never does, right?
I explain it to founders. I like Simon Sinek's Start with Why video. within that, he talks about the law of the diffusion of innovation, and he talks about um, the innovators and the early adopters, and then the early majority and late majority. It's those innovators and early adopters that, like you, the founder, just get it. They know what the problem is that you're identifying, and they see
Right.
instantly that you have that solution.
Right.
As the founder, that's who you're selling to. As the
Right.
first sales leader, you're selling to that early majority. They don't get it. They don't see
Right.
that yours instantaneously is the solution to their problem, because sometimes they don't even see the problem.
Right. Right.
So, how do you make that transition, not just from founder led sales, but as an organization and your sales motions?
Right. And that's where I really go in and I do an in-depth audit, including talking to the customers, because oftentimes too, the founder, and that 5 to 10 sales minimum rule that I have before I will work with the founder isn't hard and fast, because oftentimes, whether maybe it's a founder coming out of Techstars or Y Combinator, right? Oftentimes those first 5 to 10 customers are friends
Yeah.
or their other founders, right? And so they may not necessarily be customers that are the right fit. In fact, I would say probably most of the time, even when the sales team gets started, some of those early customers are not necessarily the ideal customers. And you can talk to millions of customer success VPs, right? That get very frustrated because sometimes you're getting customers that some of um, those those low ticket value customers that are early adopters can be the most difficult customers because they're really not necessarily the best fit, right? So, I think really what I do when I go and as a founder led sales, I spent a lot of time gathering feedback, going to the market, going to people that I see as and again, it's identifying. I have a playbook. If you go to my website, www.elizabethandrew.com, I have a downloadable, very high level playbook, free thing that people can get, right? And I think that's a good way to kind of map out who's your ideal customer. And sometimes there might be multiple, right? You might have multiple different product lines. You might have multiple different customers that you want to target. So you want to figure out and map out exactly what that value proposition is for each one of your stakeholders, right? And so a lot of that in early stage, whether it's the founder or the early sales leader or salespeople, you want to get a lot of feedback, just like product people do, right? Gather a lot of feedback from the market, find out what is working, what is not working, what is the value of what they'll pay for. Like a lot of people will say, hey, this is the greatest product ever, but are they going to pay for it, right? So what is that pain?
Exactly. Yes. So you've been on both sides of this.
Mhm.
How do I, as a founder, find the right leader to take over my sales responsibilities?
This is a very, very difficult time, to be honest, I think, for that, because the way the market's been the last 2 years, everybody's a fractional this or that, right? So I was in a channel of, with a lot of different fractional sales leaders, and somebody had posted in the Slack channel, does anybody have a sales playbook template I can use? But, it was a little bit surprising that this person was actually advising a company, because I've had to write my own in every role that I've been, right? So, I think it's, I think there's a number of different factors that, you've got to look at. You've got to really get that partnership between the CEO and the sales leader, and get aligned with what the expectations are. And I think this is one of the areas that people fail a lot as founders, is having unrealistic expectations. Again, thinking the product is going to sell itself. I've made the mistake. You learn these things as a sales leader where, the company's been around for 4 years and it's got 4 million in revenue and they expect me to bring in 20 million next year. It's got to make sure that there's realistic expectations for what what that's going to look like. And I think that's a lot of the sales leaders. I go in and I take a look at like deal count modeling. Where do we want to be? What does the current pipeline look like? What is a realistic target and forecast for the company, for the growth, and and make sure that it's an attainable plan.
So what are some of the metrics or experiences that you as a founder would look for in a potential sales leader candidate?
Well, so there's, again, this takes an audit, right? Like coming in and seeing what they're going to do. There's different strategies depending on what the type of the company is, right? Like sometimes it's really helpful to start at the bottom and get, have your initial salesperson be a really strong outbound SDR, depending on if there's any pipeline there, if you're growing from the ground up, that can be a very good place to start. I also think getting a really strong individual contributor and this is where I work a lot in a consulting basis. Like I'm like, let's get a really strong individual contributor as your first sales hire. I can help you find that person. And then maybe they don't have any of the strategy components of building the sales organization, of doing that deal count modeling, of really building out the foundation. And I can put that together and coach them and teach them and educate them on that. And then they can be your initial sales leader, right? So I think that's a really good strategy instead of hiring somebody who's very senior that you may or may not be able to afford, because that is, again, it's the most expensive mistake that most founders make.
Absolutely. And I love that what you're saying is contrarian to what I hear most often. You want to find somebody that's been there before, that's done it before, but somebody that's been an enterprise sales leader with tremendous success does not necessarily map over. And I think the approach from starting from the ground up is fantastic. I can't imagine, however, a lot of founders will say, well, yeah, let me just take a BDR and make them my VP of sales.
Right. And they shouldn't be a VP of sales. I mean, they shouldn't be a VP of sales, but they should start in the capacity. I mean, I think one of the big mistakes that a lot of people do, and I think this is probably where a lot of founders get stuck, is that you might have somebody with no experience that was in an early stage startup and have the title of VP of sales, and they don't know how to be a VP of sales. Right. So you've got to make sure, and again, it's looking, it's going back to that audit. I keep talking about that, but a lot of founders, I mean, listen, I've sold everything, but a lot of founders think enterprise is the holy grail. Like sometimes just SMB, stick with where your market is, right? You can make more money and grow more, depending on the nature of your product. Let's not try to be something we're not.
I smile and laugh at that a little bit because I've had similar conversations. But the deals are so much bigger at the enterprise level. Yes, they're also so much less frequent, and they're also so much more highly competitive. I love how you put that, stick to your area of expertise.
Right. They're also a lot harder to sell. I mean, I took one company from 4 million to 11 million at 100% outbound. We had no marketing team. We had no SDR team. It was a 100% outbound enterprise motion. It was all enterprise organizations. And, it's not even like, it can take longer. We actually had a pretty short sales cycle, but, most startups, they might not be compliant. They might not have the billing infrastructure to work with enterprise organizations. They might not have the ability to pass an RFP. They might not, so there's so many different components that might not be in place in an early stage startup that just are barriers for entry in that market.
And the worst case is they land that deal and then they don't have the infrastructure to support it. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
So I asked you how the founder might find the right leader. Let's take the opposite side of that. Now, this is before I'm hired as a potential sales leader, or even a fractional sales leader. What should I be looking for within the organization? Sounds like the founder having done some sales, but beyond that, what are some of the other things that I would be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, like I will not work with a founder that has not sold deals on their own. I look really closely at the runway, but also the organizational, like what does the funding look like?
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, I've worked with a lot, in VP of sales roles, I've worked with a lot of VCs, a lot of the powerful VCs, and oftentimes that drives different expectations to the organization, right? And that's where, as a founder, and it was because we sold the company about 3 months ago, and we just had a strategy. It was founder-led sales. It was me and my co-founder. We didn't want to raise money in this market, and we realized, and I look at the numbers too. Like, and I can give you a couple. I think oftentimes people see founders get VC funding, and they see that as a win. It may be a win, but it may not be a win. And I tell this tale of, like, I have a very good friend who um, had one of the biggest exits in the 2010s, in the early 2010s, sold the company for close to 200 million. It raised about 14 million in funding. When you're at that stage as a CEO or founder, you might have somewhere between 15 and 25% ownership of the company, right? So he ended up with close to, I don't know, I think it was like 28 million, which is a great win when he sold the company.
Yeah.
Then you pay 8 million in taxes, and then you get divorced. So all of a sudden he has 10 million, and so when I was looking at bootstrapping my own company, I was like, okay, if I can get this to 4 million and it's just me and my co-founder, and now the market turned, so the economics didn't quite work out that way. But at that time when I started, the multiples were 10x. Now they're closer
Yep.
to 4 to 6x. So that's, everything's changed. But like, if I can raise 4 million, which I can do very easily on my own, in the right market with the right product, and sell it for 40 million, and then we each have 20 million, and we flip it in 18 months, without having to build the whole team, and not so there's a lot of different ways to get to those numbers, right? So the point on that is that VC funding is not necessarily the holy grail from my perspective, and so I look very closely at the team in place,
Mhm.
the leadership team of the organization. What is that dynamic? What are the expectations? And that's, again, I go in and I want feedback from customers. I want feedback from other employees within the organization. I start at the ground up, and it could be, even if there's no sales organization, I might talk to a customer success person on the team, or, to really try to understand, what does that culture look like, and what are the plans and expectations for the organization.
So we started by asking about the signs that a business needs to transition away from founder-led sales.
Mhm.
We have time for one more question. So what I want to ask is, what are the biggest risks of not transitioning away from founder-led sales, and how can an organization mitigate those risks?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, when you've got a CEO in your early stage, and the founder or founders are doing sales, right? That's time that they're not spending on other parts of the company. I think the biggest risk to that is growth trajectory, right? Like, how quickly you want to grow. And, that's a very delicate balance, right? If you grow too fast, that can be doom and gloom for the organization. But if you don't grow fast enough, that can be as well, right? So it's really understanding, what is the market sentiment? Um, what is your plan for the organization, and is it realistic? And, and so I think it's a critical part of scaling any organization, is making that transition successfully from the founder-led sales to actually building scalable growth. And that typically happens I would say founder-led sales, and this is very much of a generalization, right? But like, if you can get it somewhere under 5 million, maybe get to 2, 3, 4 million as a founder, and then bring in your sales organization. And you have different, to your point earlier, Rob, like about the enterprise sales leader. I also, when you're looking for sales leader, I want somebody who understands that segment.
Right.
One of the big mistakes I've made in previous roles and leadership roles is bringing on even just an IC that came from Google or Salesforce. Or that's not to say they can't do it, but they're like, okay, where are my leads? Where's
Yeah.
my pitch deck? And you've
Where's
got
my
to,
deal desk?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right. So it's like, okay, go make your own one pager, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
is making sure you've got somebody that understands that area that you are moving in.
Awesome. Elizabeth,
Yeah.
this has been great. How can people learn more? Where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. At LinkedIn, I'm Elizabeth A. Andrew. So I've got 2 A's in there, middle initial. Please connect with me there. I'm happy to answer questions. I also have the website, elizabethandrew.com. I've got a free sales playbook in there. It's very high level, but it can really help direct you on the components of things you need to think through and things that you want to get down on paper in order to share with other people in the organization.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get show highlights, beyond the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. You can scan the QR code on screen or visit us at salestv.live/newsletter. This has been another edition of Sales TV Live. On behalf of myself and everyone at Sales TV, to our audience, to our guest Elizabeth, thank you all for being a part of today's conversation, and we'll see you